We can start.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am, we can start.
Mercy.
ഹലോ, മേഴ്സി മിസ്സിന് ഇപ്പോൾ കാണുന്നില്ല. ജോയിൻ ചെയ്തായിരുന്നു, ഡിസ്കണക്റ്റ് ആയി പോയിട്ടുണ്ട്. അപ്പോൾ വേറെ ആരെങ്കിലും ഒരാളെ ഒന്ന് വന്നു കിട്ടി വരുന്നുണ്ട്. Mercy ma'am, we can start. Ma'am, please unmute your audio. Okay, ma'am.
Mercy, you may please start, Mercy.
Shall I start, ma'am? Okay.
Yeah, please do.
Ever tried, ever failed. No matter, try again, fail better. Samuel Beckett. Good evening, all. Welcome online to the international webinar organized by the Department of English, Fatima Mada National College, Kollam. Today's webinar is more than an event, a day that instills hope in our darkest hour and demonstrates the resilience of humanity during this trying time amidst the pandemic. During this challenging ordeal, we have discovered strength and courage within ourselves and others. We have risen to the challenge by organizing various webinar series on different topics. I am happy today that today's resource person, Dr. A.V. Koshy, has selected a relevant topic, Modernities and the Poems of Samuel Beckett. Modernity, a modern way of thinking, working, etc. Modernist movement arose as a progressive force promising to liberate humankind from ignorance and irrationality. Placing a greater emphasis upon experimentation, modernist writers took a great interest in purposely disorientating their readership with fragmentation and elements of the absurd. A conscious experimentation with language to express both its powers and limitations became apparent components in a vast body of modern literature. One particular modernist who became fascinated with the idea of the individual and perception was the Irish playwright Samuel Beckett. His absurd play, Waiting for Godot, frequently noted for its minimalist style, and that has invited a multiplicity of possible interpretations. Most readers today, they do not think of Beckett as a poet. His reputation, his fame, his influence, and his Nobel Prize all rest firmly on his full-length plays for the stage. So I hope Today's talk will definitely give a new insight to our students. And to invoke the blessings of God, may I request our second MA student Aruna to render the prayer song.
There shall be showers of blessing. This is the promise of love. There shall be seasoned refreshing, sent from the Savior above. Showers of blessing, showers of blessing we need. Mercy drops round us are falling, but for the showers we plead. There shall be showers of blessing. Send them upon us, O Lord. Grant to us now a refreshing. Come on upon thy word. Showers of blessing, showers of blessing we need. Mercy drops round us are falling, but for the showers we plead. But for the showers we plead.
Thank you, Aruna. Now, I invite our HOD, Dr. Cynthia Michael, to formally welcome the gathering.
A very good evening to all. It is with great pleasure that I come before you all. The Department of English has been conducting a Remembrance Day in the name of Dr. Noel Jose for the past 5 years. Dr. Noel Jose was our colleague. He joined the department in October 1993 as a lecturer. My memory of Noel goes back to the time when I joined as a PG student in the Department of English. When I came to visit the HOD, Professor LCI, she introduced me to Noel as a rank holder, Kerala University rank holder in 1990. He was a great inspiration for all of us. Later, when I joined the department in 1995, he supported us in different matters. Actually, he was an encyclopedia in language. We could go to him for any reference, any type of reference with regard to words, sentences, anything. His demise was a great loss for both the students and the college. Noel was also the backbone of the autonomy. It was under his leadership that Fatima attained this autonomous status. So we felt that we should commemorate his life by conducting a Noel Jose Remembrance Day, hence this webinar. So let me go on to my pleasant duty of welcoming you all. First and foremost, I welcome the manager of our college, Reverend Father Anil Jose, and pro-manager, Father Abhilash Gregory, to this webinar in absentia. They are unable to join us due to official engagements. Next, I also welcome the principal of our college, Dr. Vincent B. Netto, who is also not present today as interviews are currently going on. It is with great pride I welcome Reverend Dr. Sylvie Anthony, principal of Infant Jesus Anglo-Indian School, who is also a very close friend of Noel and my former classmate in the PG, MA English in this college. Thank you, Father, for accepting our invite and joining us for this webinar. On behalf of the department and on my personal behalf, I welcome you, Father, to this platform. Next, it is my pleasant duty to welcome our former head, Dr. Jaya Tekeyam. Jaya Miss was the head of the department during Noel's tenure as the vice principal. She has always been supportive of all the activities of our college. Jaya Miss, as we fondly call her, was also my guide for PhD. Ma'am will speak on her experiences with Noel. Dr. Jaya Tekam is presently the head of the self-finance department of English of our own college. A very warm welcome to you, Miss. The chief guest of the day is Dr. Koshy AV, Ampat Koshy, as many of you know. Koshy has also worked with us for nearly 10 years, and I'm happy that he has accepted our invitation today for this webinar. On behalf of the college and the department, I welcome Dr. Koshy for the talk on Modernities and the poems of Samuel Beckett. Welcome, Koshy. The IQAC is the backbone of our institution. We have their support in the conduct of all programs. On behalf of the department, I welcome the IQAC coordinator, Dr. Shaiju, and also thank you, sir, for all the support that you have rendered. I also welcome the other members of the IQAC, Prijit sir and Dr. Sijin, for your constant help, technical help, in fact, for us in the conduct of all the programs. Thank you for your support, dear sirs. I welcome Prijit sir and Dr. Sijin to this webinar. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Darshana Ambiga, coordinator of the self-finance section, Nibin Nelson, assistant professor, as well as all the faculties from the self-finance. I welcome Dr. Clara B. Reshma, organizing secretary of this webinar, my friend and colleague who has taken great pains to coordinate this venture. Welcome, Claire. My colleagues of the department have always been a great support in all the activities of the department. Dr. Mercy, who is doing the comparing of this meeting. Thank you, Mercy, and welcome to one and all. Last but not the least, I would like to welcome all the participants who have joined the Department of English, Fatima Mother National College Autonomous, for the talk, Dr. Noel Joes Memorial Annual Lecture Series 2020, International Webinar on Modernities and the Poems of Samuel Beckett. Welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, ma'am. To live in hearts we leave behind is not to die. Today, we pay homage to one of our most precious colleagues, Dr. Noel Joes, who left us 6 years before. Now, I request Reverend Dr. Sylvie Anthony, Principal, Infant Jesus Higher Secondary School, Thangasheri, to share his memories with Dr. Noel Joes.
Respected resource person, Dr. A.V. Koshy, Principal, Mr. Vincent, Manager, Father Anil Jose, HOD, Dr. Cynthia, other important persons participating in this webinar, Dr. Jaya, Dr. Claire, Dr. Parvati, and other participants of this webinar. We are participating in the Dr. Noel Joes Memorial International Webinar 2020. The other day, Dr. Cynthia and Dr. Claire came to meet me and said, usually in connection with the Memorial Day of Dr. Noel Joes, there used to be a holy mass offered for the repose of his soul. This time, the times do not permit for us to have this holy mass. So kindly come and lead a prayer after sharing a few memory of Dr. Noel. That's why I'm here. I'm really happy to attend this webinar in commemoration of our dear departed Dr. Noel Jose, who has gone to receive the eternal reward from God. He was not only a good teacher, I would say he was a great teacher who inspired the students by his life and wisdom. I remember with gratitude the help given to me in my research work for the PhD doctorate given by Dr. Noel. I appreciate very much the positive observation he had to any written matter presented to him for correction. He would first appreciate, saying, brilliant work, inspiring thought. These were the comments that he would say first, and then suggest certain corrections to be made. In fact, it was a joy to submit the papers one after another to Dr. Noel. Encouragement and appreciation are the qualities needed for a great teacher, I believe. A dolphin performs synchronized activities, the jumps in an amusement park, not because it is afraid of the thrash with a stick or due to the yell and shouts of the trainer, but for a small fish it gets as the feed, as the reward. Appreciation by the teacher is a greatest reward for a student in his academic pursuit. Noel had this quality to felicitate and foster goodness in others. The selection of the topic of my thesis was also initiated by Dr. Noel. That is when I came to know about semiotic analysis for the first time. I never knew why Noel insisted on working on this topic, semiotic analysis. Today, in my ministry as a priest, I find semiotics most useful to interpret the allegories and parables in the Bible. I understand why Noel was insistent on my taking semiotics as a topic of my research. He continues to inspire me, I should say. Finally, I say he was a great teacher because he knew his subject and he loved his students. May the life of this great teacher be an inspiration to all of us who have taken up academic formation as our career, like Dr. Noel Jose. I'll lead a small prayer. With that, I will conclude. Let us raise our minds in prayer. Let us pray. I thank you, Lord, for the gift of Noel Jose as a model of a great teacher for us. May his life of dedication to his subject and his love towards students inspire and motivate us to improve the quality of our teaching profession. The truth we learn from his life is that life is not to be counted by the number of years one lived, but how well we lived. Help us to lead a life glorifying you, Lord, and for the well-being of our brethren. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, Let the perpetual light shine upon him. May the souls of all the faithful departed through the mercy of God rest in peace. Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Father, for sharing your memories. Now, I request our beloved Dr. Jaya Teke ma'am, former HOD of English, Fatima Mother National College, Kollam, to share her memories.
Good evening to all of you, my dear friends, for making me part of this webinar today. Father Sylvia Anthony pretty much said everything that we had known and felt about Noel. And to the very touching prayer that he said, I would like to add this, that as long as all of us, his peers and colleagues, as long as all of us who knew him well remain sane, sober, and sensible, we are never
Jaya Miss, can you hear me? I think there is some net issue. And she is from her system.
ഒന്നുകൂടെ റീജോയിൻ ചെയ്യണം ലിങ്കിൽ
JMS has some net issues. She'll be rejoining.
Just this one to
Can you all hear me?
Yes, Koshy, we can hear you, Koshy. JMS has some network issue. We're just waiting for her to join and complete her speech before we move on, Koshy. Just a minute. She's trying. Your audio is very clear.
ഷിജിന്റെ നമ്പർ ഇല്ല.
Cynthia, can we put that at the end and go on? Many people are waiting.
Okay. Mercy.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
Now I invite Dr. Parvati, Dean of Arts, FMNC Kollam, to introduce the resource person.
A very good evening to one and all present on this virtual platform. Reverend Father Sylvia Anthony, Dr. Jaya Tekayam, Dr. Cynthia Catherine Michael, our HOD, Dr. A.V. Koshy, today's resource person, and my dear participants. I'm indeed much honored and happy to introduce my dear friend and former colleague, Dr. Ambat Koshy, who worked in the Department of English, Fatima Mother National College for almost 10 years from 1995. He is presently an assistant professor in the Department of English at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Jazan University, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. He has written, co-written, and co-edited many books of criticism, fiction, and poetry to his credit, with authors like A.B. Varghese, Gorakhnath Gangani, Angel Meredith, Madhumita Ghosh, Seenat Ibrahim, Rukhaya M.K., and Beena Bishwas, among others, and one of them, a solo effort and pamphlet, a treatise on poetry for beginners that was reprinted once as Art of Poetry. He is a Pushcart Poetry Prize nominee in the year 2012 and 4 times Best Poem winner in Destiny Poets UK, ICOP, 2013, 14, 18, and 19. And he was thrice featured in Camel Saloon's The Hum for Best Poem or Editor's Pick. Even as a child, he won the Shangar's International Award for Writing at the tender age of 7. He is a reputed critic and expert on Samuel Beckett, having done his PhD on him, as well as having written a book on him titled Samuel Beckett's English Poetry, besides being a literary theoretician. His other books include Wake Up India, Essays for Our Times, co-authored with Dr. Beena Bishwas, and Mahesh Dattani's plays, Staging the Invisibles. Research essays by many collected and co-edited with Beena Bishwas, the significant anthology that he edited, and a collection of his stories titled Scream and Other Urban Legends, published by Liffey, and an anthology or collection of poetry, Igniting Key, with Beena Bishwas again, and Pramila Kadhan. He has edited or co-edited many books, including A Man Outside History by Nasir Ahmad Nasir, and Inglix, an anthology by Poets Corner, and Umbilical Cords with Dr. Madan Gandhi, Dr. Santosh Bakaya, Himali Narang, and Vinita Mekot. Koshy instituted the Ruel International Literary Prize in 2014 for excellence in writing and runs an autism NPO with his wife Anna Gabriel. He administers, with the help of others, the literary group Rejected Stuff on Facebook, also known as the Significant League. His poems have been studied in a research paper by Dr. Seenat Ibrahim and by Kirti Sengupta in The Dazzling Bards and translated into Hindi, Urdu, Gujarati, German, Bengali, Tamil, Spanish, Arabic, Marathi, and Malayalam. He won World Bank's Urgent Evoke and participated in European Union's Edger Days. He has been interviewed extensively by people like Gina McWright. He has other degrees like Dip Ed, diploma, certificates, and awards or prizes to his credit, including Best Researcher and Academic 2018 in Jazan University. His latest books are Allusions to Simplicity and Birds of Different Feathers, both collections of poetry, like his first one titled Fix. He is working on 10 to 15 books now, one being on Bob Dylan. He has also contributed to international magazines, both online and print, and poetry and short story anthologies aplenty. He was a columnist for Niam Clun Plumtree, Ireland. He has had retrospectives of his work done by Duane Boris and Glory Sasikala in Duane's New Poetry.blogspot.com and Glomag, respectively. And he recently achieved 10,000 reads on ResearchGate for his research articles on display there, and won a certificate for NaNoWriMo USA 2018, as well as one from Harvard 10 in Masterpieces in World Literature in 2019 with an A+. And his 4 latest books are The Blue Hours with Deepika K.C. Chand, Wine Kiss Poems with Jagari Mukherjee, Vodka by the Volga with Dr. Santosh Bakaya, and the Roseate Sonnet Anthology as editor and contributor, and the last 3 became Amazon bestsellers. Now, we are indeed much privileged, dear Dr. Koshy, to have you with us today. On behalf of the IQAC of Fatima Mother National College, and on behalf of the Department of English, and on my own behalf, I welcome you, my dear friend, Dr. Koshy, to deliver the keynote address on modernities and the poems of Samuel Beckett. Dear Dr. Koshy.
Can I start?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. Thank you, Father Sylvia Anthony. Sorry that Vincent is not there. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Parvati. Thank you, Dr. Jayat again. Satiraj, who's in the audience, and all of you for giving me this opportunity and honor to come back to my college. I consider Fatima Mother National College as my college, as my home, which I had to leave because I had no other choice. And I'm really happy. Thank Claire also, who I know must be somewhere, and Mercy. And because unfortunately Jay teacher's talk was cut short, I would just like to say 1 or 2 things about Noel. Noel and I were very close. And, when I left on the last day, I needed some money and I was trying to take from the college cooperative bank. And either I was too late when I reached there, or I don't remember exactly what happened. Or they said that because you have this time, we can't give you money or something. I remember Noel giving me the money, but that's not what I want to talk about. I remember also that, when I wanted to return it to him, I told him, Noel, I've gone off to Bangalore, so you will have to go to my father's house in Trivandrum and collect it from him. And he, his nobility was seen in that he didn't say anything. He said, sure, Koshy. And he traveled all the way from Bailon to my father's house and he collected the money and he went back. So I am also very honored that I am called to speak for this occasion. Memory of Noel. And now I want to launch into my talk because I know that a lot of people, I can't really see the crowd, but there must be many people watching on YouTube and on Zoom, and I don't want to uh, take their time away. So I will immediately go into my talk. This is actually a return for me in a way. I'm coming back to Beckett after 1994 when I finished my research, after 24 years, 26 years. And there is a reason why I'm coming back to this topic, because now I feel that I'm mature enough to handle it in a much better way. I hope I am still very clear and audible to you. My video and my audio.
Yes, sir, it's fine.
Yeah. Now, when I was doing research, I was working on Beckett's poems in English, which are actually very few in number. There were also his French poems, but I did not do them because many of them were not translated. So I only worked on the English poems that were available. And because Beckett is such a vast topic, to put it in terms of discourse, using the name Beckett as a discourse, the Beckettian discourse. Yeah, I had enough stuff to do my PhD on just his poems. But later, all these years I have been working silently on Beckett. I brought out the book on him, but I have been working silently. I read all the French poems. I have been reading all the things that came out later that were released about Beckett posthumously, and reading the later developments. And now I am in a position to talk more authoritatively about Beckett and modernities and his poetry. These are the three streams I am going to divide my talk into. And I have also, I hope, grown as a thinker to handle this topic well. So to talk about Beckett first, traditionally speaking, I have opened before me, what was said about Beckett by the Nobel Prize jury or committee when he won it in 1969. And if you look at Beckett's editors also, if you look at his works, you can see that it's a very traditional division. Like Mercy was saying, people speak about modernism and the absurd and his dramas. But what the Nobel Prize jury or committee said on granting him the Nobel Prize was for his writing, which in new forms for the novel and drama, in the destitution of modern man, acquires its elevation. This makes me think. Here they mention his novels and his dramas, but it also talks about his writing, which in the destitution of modern man acquires its elevation. And we know about the destitution of modern man. We know about the rise of the political right in different countries. We know about the pandemic that is going on. We know about the economic situation we are all going through, where everyone is struggling to make ends meet in the new normal. We know about the spiritual values that are deteriorating or degenerating across the world, according to some observers. And it's a very dark time. It's very much like the works of Samuel Beckett. And in this time, I want to relook at Beckett's work, and I want to point out that what I did then, due to limitations, of course, was very important in terms of literature, in terms of criticism, and in terms of theory as a seed, because I want to relook at Beckett's works not as prose or non-fiction of criticism or drama or novels or short stories as it is usually looked at by people, and poems or poetry. But I want to see his work, primarily re-looking at his work, which is what I should have done then if I had the courage and if I had been ready to spend more time on it. To look at his major works, not in the traditional brackets in which it is placed, but as a deconstruction of writing and also as poetry. Yeah, I want to repeat that. It is very important to look at Beckett's novels, for example, not as novels, but as writing that questions the idea of the form or genre of the novel. And his plays are actually writing that questions the genre or form of drama. And it's the same with his poems. But at the same time, I want to say that underlying all this, Beckett is a poet. He's not, like people think, a great novelist or a great dramatist, although he is also that. He is so many things. But when I read Beckett now, when I read The Unnameable, when I read How It Is, the novel How It Is, I mean, I no longer read it as a novel. It's not a novel. And when I read perhaps Last Tape or Waiting for Godot or Endgame, I mean, those are not plays. I read them as poetry, as sheer poetry. Someone who really understood what poetry is about and what deconstruction is about. So I want to start right from the beginning. Beckett was born on 13 April 1906 in Dublin, Ireland. And I want to end by coming to really modern theory in 2020. But to start with a few biographical details, he was born on, according to tradition and himself, and the day on Good Friday. Some people said that is symbolic of the fact that his vision is very dark. And he died on December 22nd, 1989 in Paris, France, from Ireland to France. He was bilingual. He used to write in English and French, translate from English to French, from French to English fluently. He was multilingual. He knew Spanish, German. He knew a lot of things. And, but let me come to his works. Now, I could, of course, go through a chronological narration of his works, and we have already taken a lot of time for the introduction, so I won't be doing that, but I will be coming directly to the point I want to speak of. Beckett's first collection of short stories, written under the influence of James Joyce, as was his first novel, which was published after his death, called Dream of Fair to Middling Women. And after that, he wrote a short story called Echo's Bones, which was rejected by his publisher. And the rest of his short stories, were published as a collection called More Pricks Than Kicks. More Pricks Than Kicks, which is, of course, both a dirty pun and also a reference to the Bible, because he was very much deep using allusions and references from the Bible. Now, this has a story called Dante and the Lobster. So you can see that, he starts in a very Eurocentric way. This reference to Dante, the writer, and the character himself is taken from Dante's Divine Comedy. And his influence is James Joyce and T.S. Eliot, very modernist. But I want to read a paragraph from the story Dante and the Lobster to drive home the 2 points that I want to talk about. One, that Beckett is already deconstructing his own work and thereby throwing a challenge to the idea of literature, the idea of high modernism, to the idea of high art, and asking what is high art, what is high modernism, what is literature? Is it anything more than writing? And if it is, what kind of writing is that? So I'll read a paragraph from the story to make clear what I'm talking about. Belacqua drew near to the house of his aunt. Let us call it winter. The dusk may fall now and a moon rise. Now this is being written nearly 100 years ago. And already we have the deconstruction part. Because after writing that first sentence in that paragraph, Suddenly Beckett interferes as a narrator and he says, this is only fiction, like Italo Calvino. How does he say it? He says, let us call it winter. That dusk may fall now and a moon rise. So this is startling, for the author to come into the text and to say, see, I'm telling you a story, but this is a story that's being told by me, and I can do anything I want in it, and I am going to let you into the secret of what I am doing. So I am changing the season. I'm telling you it's winter, and I will make the moon rise because it's only a fictional moon. It's a fictional season. A fictional dusk has fallen, and this undercuts in one way the seriousness of the story. So it seems, if you think about it. But in another way, it makes it interesting for us because we wonder, can this writer who has just exploded our illusion that this is a story where something important is happening and so we have willingly suspended our belief, can he get back our interest after exploding our illusion? And Beckett gets our interest back. And how he does it is why I want to say that we have to consider his works as poetry, because he uses one of the oldest techniques in the world, which is he brings in a passage which is not seemingly, he brings in a few sentences which I'm going to read, which grab our attention again after having disturbed us and made us ask, oh, but why is he saying that, it's not really winter, but he is making it winter. It's not really dusk, but he is making it dusk. He is making the moon rise. What about the character? Why did he leave the character hanging in the air? As a metafictional device. And so, he writes, at the corner of the street, a horse was down and a man sat on its head. I know, thought Belacqua, that is considered the right thing to do. But why? A lamp lighter flew by on his bike, tilting with his pole at the standards, jousting a little yellow light into the evening. A poorly dressed couple stood in the bay of a pretentious gateway, she sagging against the railings, her head lowered, he standing facing her. He stood up close to her, his hands dangled by his sides. Where we were, thought Belacqua, as we were. He walked on, gripping his pass. Now, why I am reading this section very carefully is to point out that how Beckett, after puncturing, after disrupting the illusion of fiction, that fiction is not fiction, by admitting to us that fiction is only fiction, he gets back our attention by using the oldest technique a writer can, which is he gets our attention back with the power of his writing, which is based on imagery. And we are gripped again. We find it fascinating. I want to read it again carefully to explain what I'm talking about. A lamp lighter flew by on his bike, tilting with his pole at the standards, jousting a little yellow light into the evening. A poorly dressed couple stood in the bay of a pretentious gateway, she sagging against the railings, her head lowered, he standing facing her. he stood up close to her, his hands dangled by his sides. Where we were, thought Belacqua, as we were. You know, you are completely taken aback by the sheer poetry of these lines. And just earlier he had said, let us make dusk fall now. That's a narrator's speech. But here, when we read about the lamplighter who is tilting with his pole at the standards, or at the lamps on the street lights, the street lamps, jousting a little yellow light into the evening. I don't know about you, but as a reader and a writer, the dusk earlier, which was not something fictional, which we were told was fictional, and the evening here, evening or dusk. By the time I come to this evening, just 2 sentences later, I again forget that earlier Beckett had said that this evening is not a real evening. And this evening looks to me as real as an evening in reality. How does he do this magic? He does it by drawing on his Irish background, what he had seen in the streets of Ireland, and by describing it exactly and accurately, including the couple, who are in that position, standing facing each other. They are attracted to each other, and they are also worried that the other person may not like me. The eternal, position of love, where you're attracted and repulsed because you fear that the attraction may not be returned. With this, it takes our mind away from the metafictional aspects. And my point is, it takes it away with the power of what we know as poetry, showing that deep insight, according to me, just as it is important to stress Beckett, the deconstructionist, one who was deconstructing literature, writing, and art, and high art, modernism, and drama, and the novel, and even poetry. Just as it is important to stress on all those things, it's also important to stress on the fact that Beckett was intricately, consummately, in a cliched manner, I can say, in a stereotyped manner, I can say, very much, a person who is Irish, and there's a cliche or stereotype about Irish writers that they can't escape poetry. They are poets by nature. And whether that is true or not, it's true about the Irish writers we know and respect, like Beckett, Joyce, Yeats, etc., Sean O'Casey, John Millington Synge, and even new writers like Craig McPherson, American Irish writer. They are out and out poets. And Beckett shows that he is out and out poet. And he creates a startling kind of poetry by fighting against the poetry in himself and trying to kill it. But still, it comes out in dribs and drabs, like paint squeezed out of tubes. And what happens then is, when the poetry is killed and only very little of it seeps out, unwittingly, unknowingly, even perhaps to himself, it gains 1,000-fold in power. Something like in homeopathy, where, in the medicine, you make the medicine stronger by making it weaker. And in the same way, Beckett makes poetry more powerful by denying its power. And he does it not only with poetry, but with many other things. In fact, one of the words connected with studying Beckett is a word from science, not from philosophy, and that word is entropy, where the power of poetry keeps getting less and less, but thereby it increases more and more. So now let us come to reading a poem by Beckett. Now this, of course, is a poem, but here already Beckett is, very much far ahead of his time. It's a poem called Cascando, which is taken from music. And Cascando actually talks about, a kind of crescendo where it rises gradually to that step by step, unlike diminuendo. But I'll read the poem first. It's a poem. It's in his collected poems, so his editors consider it a poem. We don't know whether you consider it a poem or I consider it a poem, but let me read it anyway. It's very beautiful, whether it's poem or prose or whatever it is. Why not merely the despaired of occasion of word shed? Is it not better abort than be barren? The hours after you are gone are so leaden. They will always start dragging too soon. The grapples clawing blindly the bed of want, bringing up the bones, the old loves. Sockets filled once with eyes like yours. All always. Is it better too soon than never? The black want splashing their faces, saying again, never floated the love, nor 9 months, nor 9 lives. The second part, saying again, if you do not teach me, I shall not learn. Saying again, there is a last, even of last times of begging, last times of loving, of knowing, not knowing, pretending. A last even of last times of saying, if you do not love me, I shall not be loved. If I do not love you, I shall not love. The churn of stale words in the heart again. Love, love, love. Thud of the old plunger, pestling the unalterable way of words. Terrified again of not loving, of loving and not you, of being loved and not by you, of knowing, not knowing, pretending. I and all the others that will love you, if they love you. The third part, unless they love you. So this is a very powerful poem. This is his most famous poem. I mean, this is a poem that people quote again and again because of sentences like, if you do not love me, I shall not be loved. If I do not love you, I shall not love. I mean, it's as powerful as anything written by Shakespeare. And then terrified again of not loving, of loving and not you, of being loved and not by you. Very, very powerful poetry. And where did Beckett get this, ability to write this kind of powerful lines, these kind of powerful poems? Here also you can see, he says something very serious, and then as if he's ashamed of it, he suddenly brings it to a meta poetic level where he tries to cut it down. Is it not better abort than be barren? Why not write the poem? Stop writing it and finding that it's a failure. Or when he says, the churn of stale words in the heart again, love, love, love. Now, acknowledging that the word love no longer has any power because it has been used too many times and no one knows what it means anymore. And it's very difficult to use the word love without it being cliche. And he knows that and he brings it into the poem in a meta-poetic way. But at the same time, he uses the word love so powerfully that, we come back to it again and again. We come back to it again and again. So, bringing up the bones, O love, sockets filled once with eyes like yours. And, saying again, if you do not teach me, I shall not learn. Saying again, there is a last, even of last times of begging, last times of loving, a last, even of last times of saying, if you do not love me, I shall not be loved. If I do not love you, I shall not love. Terrified again of not loving, of loving and not you, of being loved and not by you. So powerful. I mean, if you love poetry, you just take off. And you find, and now we come to what I am trying to explain to you. This power in his poem that I have read out to you, there in his French poems, there in what people call Beckett's poetry. It's there in his prose works equally powerfully right up to the end. So I had written, this article where I was writing, one of the books I'm writing, how to write the novel. It's not completed. I've only got to about 6 chapters. But, there I have taken the section from one of his last books. The last books he wrote, where there was a book called Company. There was a book called Ill Seen, Ill Said. Ill Seen, Ill Said. Novellas. And then there was a book called Worst Word Ho. And then there was a very small article which came in New Yorker called Stirrings Still. Again, fiction. And there was a poem which I have studied in my thesis. Those are his very last works, these 5 that I mentioned. But I want to talk about this book, Company. And again, we see the experimentalist. He uses the second person, you, which is not usually used by writers. That's why I used it. And I want to read that section. And you may wonder where I'm going, but after I deal with Beckett as a poet, I will go on to something that will be very useful to people listening to me in terms of research, doing research on Beckett or doing research itself. So here's a section from Company. The light there was then. On your back in the dark, the light there was then. Sunless, cloudless brightness. You slip away at break of day and climb to your hiding place on the hillside, a nook in the gorge. East beyond the sea, the faint shape of high mountain, 70 miles away, according to your long man. For the 3rd or 4th time in your life, the first time you told them and were derided, all you had seen was cloud. So now you hoard it in your heart with the rest. Back home at nightfall, supperless to bed. You lie in the dark and are back in that light. Straining out from your nest in the gorge, with your eyes across the water till they ache. You close them while you count 100, then open and strain again, again and again, till in the end it is there. Palest blue against the pale sky. You lie in the dark and are back in that light. Fall asleep in that sunless, cloudless light. Sleep till morning light. I mean, you read a passage like this, it works as fiction, it works as autobiography, it works as literature, it works as writing, and it works as sheer poetry. And this is what I want to point out, that Beckett could deconstruct things to such an extent that he was also reconstructing it in his own way. And he reached a state of excellence, something that inspires me. Whenever I write, whenever I read, whenever I think, I want to reach this state of excellence. In fact, I did research on Beckett for 6 years and I gave up because he was becoming too much of an influence and I wanted a break. And I've taken a long break, as I told you, 26 years. But now I feel I can come back because I have, regained control where Beckett will not possess me, but I feel that I can make Beckett my possession. And, that is something that's worth thinking about. So now we come to the part of the talk that will help you. Where does Beckett start? Beckett starts as a Cartesian. He was influenced by René Descartes. And why do I say this? I know I'm talking to teachers who are involved in research and doing things like writing research papers, contributing to books, maybe editing, maybe anthologizing like me, maybe running research, magazines. And I'm going to give you a series of lenses as to how you can look at literature, at a writer, at his works, at a master. And, so the first thing that I want to tell you is when we start looking at Beckett, we look at him and we speak of the Cartesian Beckett. But what is it that I can abstract from that for you, students who are doing BA or MA or MPhil or PhD or whatever, and teachers? What I want to abstract is the first thing that we can do when we look at a writer is, when we want to do research on him is, we need to connect his works to philosophy. And it's very important to know the tradition of Western and Eastern philosophy, know the schools of philosophy. For example, if you're doing Western philosophy, need to know about ontology, about epistemology, about logic, about rhetoric, about each of these schools. I mean, there are 7 schools basically. And you have to ask yourself, which philosopher can I apply to this writer? Or which philosopher is this writer influenced by? So that I can connect the two and I can read that philosopher to understand more about this writer. And I can read this writer to understand more about that philosopher. So to understand Beckett, first, you need to understand Descartes, and you have to read the book Discourse on Method, and you know about it. Descartes started by doubting everything. I have it open before me, but I am not going to read from it because I think all of you know about it. And he said that, yeah, I doubt everything, but to doubt everything, there has to be an I. And so the one thing that I am sure of is that I exist, the self exists. I think, therefore I am. And, he, Descartes, set the foundation for new philosophy in Eurocentrism through his book Discourse on Method and through this discovery that the self exists. So because of his philosophy, everything started centering around the self. But Beckett questions that, but he starts there. Descartes divides the world in terms of 3 binaries: the self and the world, the mind and the body, and the subject and the object. Beckett starts here. If you really want to understand the early works of Beckett, you have to understand that he was looking at it in terms of self and non-self, self and the world, the split between the mind and the body, and the split between the subject and the object. Perceiving oneself as subject, perceiving oneself as object, perceiving others as a subject would perceive objects, perceiving others as if they also are subjects, and perceiving yourself as an object being perceived by them as subjects. I hope I am not complicating you. It's philosophy, plain and simple. I hope you don't feel confused. I just wanted to point out a very important thing about Samuel Beckett. He was highly influenced as a modernist. He wrote an essay about modern Irish poetry, and he said the wasteland matters by T.S. Eliot because the wasteland is a record of the breakdown between the object and the subject, between the subject and the object. And he says this is what modernism is about. So some people may ask me, what is modernism about? And according to Beckett, modernism is about studying in literature the breakdown between the object and the subject, or the subject and the object. And this is what is done according to him in the wasteland. And although he was a disciple of Joyce, his objection to Joyce was he felt that Joyce does not study this breakdown between the object and the subject in terms of communication. And his objection to Eliot is that Eliot does not push it far enough. That he comes to the brink of the abyss and he stops there. He is afraid to go beyond that. But Beckett himself decided that he will push it further. He will push his way further into the abyss in studying in literature the breakdown between the subject and the object. And that is how he starts on his most brilliant works. You know, he went through writing books like Mercier and Camier and what. So when we study Beckett, you speak of the Cartesian Beckett, you speak of the modernist Beckett, you speak of the Beckett influenced by James Joyce and T.S. Eliot. But how is this going to help us? I told you. It helps us that we can take any writer, but you have to look at the philosophical base of that writer. And you also have to look at philosophy to understand which philosopher you would like to apply to that writer. So just like I applied Cartesianism, which I got from Beckett himself, because he himself says I am influenced by Rene Descartes, but I could have applied another philosopher, and many people did that. So we come to the next Beckett, and that is the existential Beckett. When you study What, the novel What, W-A-T-T, written by Beckett, experimental novel, people said that, he is, talking about existential. And they started, studying him in connection with Albert Camus and Soren Kierkegaard and Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir. And why this was interesting was Beckett himself, he never said, he didn't say, look, I read Camus, I read Kierkegaard, I read Karl Jaspers, I read Sartre, and I read, Simone Weil or Simone de Beauvoir. He didn't say I'm influenced by them. So this is why I said there are two ways as a researcher how we can approach a work. Take the writer, but those who are working, for example, Estlin clearly says Beckett, he connects Beckett to Camus and the essay, The Myth of Suicide. The myth of Sisyphus, which deals with the question of whether you should commit suicide or not. And he connects it to Waiting for Godot. So he takes Camus, he takes existentialism and he connects it to Beckett. And he doesn't care whether Beckett calls himself an absurdist or an existentialist, or whether Waiting for Godot, according to Beckett, is about existentialism or God or absurdity or anything. So this is another track. But here also the track is philosophical. So if you are researchers listening to me, the BA level or MA level or MPhil or PhD or teachers, young or old, my question is, as this is a literature talk, if you are interested in literature, if you are reading writers, my question is this: who are the philosophers these writers are influenced by? And have you read those philosophers also? Do you know the schools of philosophy in the West? Do you know the schools of philosophy in the East? Do you know who the philosophers are? And if you are going to connect a philosopher to the writer, irrespective of whether the writer knows about it or not, or a philosophy or philosophies, who are you going to connect? And you have to answer the question why. Why do you connect this philosopher? If I connect Hegel, why do I connect Hegel to Beckett? If I connect Schopenhauer, if I connect Heidegger, why do I connect them to Beckett? I have to answer these questions. This makes it very interesting, and I hope this makes it useful also for you. My talk is becoming useful for you now, I hope. So after we study Cartesian Beckett, or Beckett in terms of philosophy, we study existential Beckett, which is again Beckett in terms of philosophy. We study modernist Beckett, which is Beckett in terms of literature and aesthetics. And aesthetics is one of the schools of philosophy in the West. And we also study Beckett the humanist or anti-humanist or post-humanist, and then we are studying him again in terms of philosophy. We are applying the school of ethics. So that's why I said, we have to be very thorough in knowing philosophy if you really want to go into studying literature. Before we come to literary theory and literary criticism and talk of it, probably without knowing what it is, without having read the source textbooks, as some people do, and they don't have a tradition in it, they really don't know the developments. But they still use words. But before that, you need a foundation in philosophy. This is my point. Then you can speak about modernism and modernities and existentialism. You can speak about Cartesianism. You can speak about Beckett, the ontologist. Many people say that Beckett is an ontologist. Or you can say, everyone is talking about the book by Shashi Tharoor that is going to be released. Now, The Battle to Belong. And now the question is, the battle to belong to a nation, to an ideology, to a religion. These are the three things he's dealing with there, to a political party of philosophy. But if we, as I said, if you are well schooled in, grounded in philosophy, this is, you can see, you can frame it as Derrida puts it. You can frame it and say this is an ethical issue that he is dealing with. It's not aesthetic. And he will be using logic and he will be using rhetoric. He will use epistemology, the epistemology of the history of, the ideas of nation and ideology and of political philosophy, etc. So this is why this path is very interesting. So now let us go on. Let us go on and let's speak about Beckett the minimalist. People speak of Beckett the minimalist, and here we have entered aesthetics. Minimalism was there in art, in painting, in sculpture, in film, in cinematic studies. We come across studies about minimalism, and it was also there in literature because of people like Beckett. Beckett wrote, by his standards, large plays like Waiting for Godot, which has only 2 acts, and Happy Days, and he wrote also from then on, an N.K. These are his largest plays. After that, his plays get shorter and shorter. There are only a few pages. So he was called a minimalist. is not really a minimalist because he also wrote huge novels like The Unnameable and Molloy and Malondice and How It Is. So he was also a maximalist at the same time. But people speak of Beckett's minimalism. And again, I want to talk about the foundation that you have to understand that when people speak of Beckett's minimalism, they are speaking of Beckett's aesthetics, or they are speaking of examining aesthetic questions. When they speak of Beckett's post-humanism, anti-humanism, or or humanism, they are speaking of ethics. When they speak of absurdity, existentialism, Cartesianism, they are speaking of philosophy, and always they are speaking of logic. Always they are speaking of rhetoric, and then they speak of Beckett's nihilism, because there are a place of Beckett which people say, don't show any sign of any morality. They're totally moral. They're totally destructive. They don't seem to care whether, humans have any values or not. They don't seem at all bothered with this question. So they connect it to Nietzsche. They connect it to Also Sprach Zarathustra, or Thus Spake Zarathustra. They say Beckett could have written all this only because, like Nietzsche, he believes that God is dead. He is an anti-theist and he is a atheist. But at the same time, there are also studies on Beckett as a theist, the last Christ-haunted figure, according to Maria Jolas. So Beckett seems to be like the Bible, all things to all men. He was so deep, so vast, so profound. He could really reach out to all kinds of people and make them all write books on him. Because you find, like Shakespeare, he has all these strains, virus strains in him, just like COVID has many virus strains. Parvati, I think you are the moderator, so please tell me, about time, because I don't know how much time I have really. We started late. Am I still there? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I can hear you, Koshy. Please continue. Yeah.
How much time do I have left?
You take your own time, Koshy. We are eagerly listening to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't want to bore you. Okay, let's go on. So you think I'm talking about Beckett? Of course, I'm talking about Beckett because Beckett is very deep, very profound. I can tell you all about Beckett for hours. I'm madly in love with Beckett, and that's why I returned to him finally. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that when you touch a great writer, you also touch modernism, touch history, touch Cartesianism, you touch philosophy, touch existentialism, you touch nihilism, you touch absurdity, you touch minimalism, and then where do we go from there? This is what I want to go on. Where do we go from there? Yeah, we go on. If we take a huge poem, and I'm saying this without any problem at all. I consider The Unnameable as a huge poem. It's also a novel, according to some people, or it is a novel that is being deconstructed. The novel form is being deconstructed entirely. But for me, it's a poem, or it's a poem that has been deconstructed entirely, whichever way you want to talk about it. Or it's just prose. It's just writing, and it's literature. Or it's not literature. It's a new field called alliterature. Whatever you want to call it, it's all valid because it's such a masterpiece, The Unnameable. And some people have said as a joke, it comes very close to being the unreadable. Unnameable means the unreadable. Very few people have actually read The Unnameable from beginning to end. But because I was a research student, I gritted my teeth and I read the whole thing from beginning to end. Why is Beckett remembered mainly? For Waiting for Godot. And Hugh Kenner has a statement on it. Hugh Kenner says, in the 30s, everyone lived in the wasteland. And in the 50s, everyone waited for Godot. But it's not just in the 50s. In 2020, we are waiting for the coronavirus to pass away. And is there not, in a sense, the same thing as waiting for Godot? Some people are waiting, in hospitals under tremendous grief and pain. And, coronavirus doesn't pass away, but death comes with them, and death becomes Godot. So he created such a powerful symbol, or, he created such a powerful metaphor for what people think is modern life. Modernity is supposed to have ended with the Second World War. But here in 2020, I am still talking about Beckett because he goes far beyond that. He applies to the postmodern world. And I was talking about unnameable and how it is, especially. And what I want to say about how it is something that we can study in terms of structuralism. Because it is a tripartite novel or poem. And, it has three parts. Again, like Dante's Divine Comedy, or like the Holy Trinity, or like, Shiva and Vishnu and Brahma. And you can say that these three parts are like three movements of a symphony. And so, we can study it in terms of, structuralism. And what is structuralism? Structuralism, as defined by Roland Barthes, as defined by Claude Lévi-Strauss, as defined by the early structuralists, is studying the relationship between the component parts of a structure and bringing out the elements that make it possible for us to see it as a structure. So definitely we can, do a structuralist study on Beckett's How It Is, on all Beckett's plays, because they are very mathematical, they are very geometric, and even many of his poems are, purely based on permutation and combination. In other words, to put it in a nutshell, they are very structural. But if we study Beckett in terms of structuralism, we have to go on to superstructuralism or post-structuralism and postmodernism. And I have already done that. Throughout, I have been implicitly comparing Beckett with Derrida. But he can also, he worked in radio, he worked in film, he worked in TV, he worked on the stage. He even worked in a video game for one of his plays, Quad. He worked with the written word, of course. And so, he can be studied in terms of hyper-reality of a thinker like Baudrillard, or he can be studied in terms of postmodernism, by, taking up the theory of a writer like Jean-Francois Lyotard. So we have a series of Becketts. He lived till 89. He started, of course, he was born in 1906, but he started writing, by the age of, say, when he was in his 20s. And, for about 69 or 70 years, he wrote. And, to study him is also to understand that, if I want to study writers for those 70 years, to understand that I need to know philosophy, I need to know psychology, I need to know how Lacan can be applied to Beckett, and I need to know about right up to Derrida and postmodernism and Lacan and Carl Gustav Jung and Freud and anything, it all appears in his work. There are teasing, tantalizing glimpses by which Beckett becomes a window or a portal and leads us to all these things in the world all around. I learned chess to understand a game in Beckett, in Murphy. So he led me to chess. He led me to Western classical music. It was a tremendous experience that I had to learn chess because, he gives the actual chess game in his novel, which I haven't seen anyone else do. and to play it and to understand why it's a very strange chess game, I had to learn it. And then he goes on. He is an ontological writer, so we need to study ontology. And now I want to come to the crux of my talk. I haven't lost the thread. I'm still talking about poetry. I'm still talking, but I want to tell you that now I don't know about what's happening there in Kerala now in terms of research, but I think it's very up to date. So that now we speak of affect theory, and we speak of disability studies, we speak of trauma, literary theory and trauma studies. We speak of ethnic studies. And my question is this: can we take a writer like Beckett? Can we take a writer like George Louis Borges? Can we take a writer like James Joyce or T.S. Eliot? And can we apply these latest theories to them? Or can we only apply them to writers who are writing today? And this is something that we need to think about. And so I want to read something. If you read Beckett, there's a progressive disembodiment in his works. For example, he doesn't speak of embodiment but disembodiment. He disembodies his characters. In a play called Not I, there is only a mouth and the tongue of a woman that we can see on stage. In his last important work, Westward Ho, half the bodies of an old man, an old woman, and a child, half the bodies appear. How it is just about an I, and unnameable is just about a kind of a body. So how does this work, And I want to read an abstract from one of the latest disability studies, on Beckett. And it talks about, there's a reason why I'm interested in disability. My son has autism. So that's why I'm very much interested in disability theory. But, I just want to read this abstract, for example. The paper is called University, Exhaustion and Failing Better, Reading Beckett with Disability Studies. And this is very interesting. It shows that Beckett is still relevant, and you can apply him to the latest theories, although he is also puzzlingly at a parallel to these theories, because like I told you, trauma speaks of embodiment, but Beckett speaks of disembodiment. And in disability, generally people either speak of overcoming the disability, valorizing overcoming, or they speak of the need to support the inability to support inability. They let us continue helping these people because they will not become able. But Beckett avoids it because he doesn't pass any moral judgment on it, and he presents his disabled characters. Molloy, for example, does not have one leg and has a crutch. So he's a disabled character, physically disabled. There are also mental health issues in many characters in Beckett. For example, the character in Not I, so not just a problem of, it's a mental health problem. She has Logaria, and she avoids saying I. She says not I. She avoids. It's a mental health problem according to, because like Lacan and all that, where you are afraid to ascribe a self to yourself. It's the other extreme of narcissism. Anyway, let me read this abstract. The emergence of theories of disability in the last decades has rendered figurative interpretation suspect. Neglect of literal and material truths has been hailed unethical. The exercising of an ableist bias that utilizes physical impairment as a rhetorical device. Any attempt to reconcile such critical concerns with Beckett's writing must take cognizance of an essential incongruity between the socially conscripted theoretical framework and aesthetic experimentation. between a mimetic fidelity to lived experience and an art of non-relation. The essay suggests that Beckett's poetics of exhaustion and its rejection of substitution and analogy in the interpretation of figures allows us to think beyond the interdisciplinary divide. Now, this matters. The body is not imagined as a stand-in or receptacle for philosophical ideas, but rather as the materiality of mental and physical impairments at the same time, that it loads them with a variety of different metonymical connections. Such a stylization of excess and accumulation serves to release disability from existing stereotypes and predetermined moral judgment. It does so while sidestepping an impasse in disability studies between the need to valorize overcoming on the one hand and the need to support the inability to do so on the other. Neither extolling the supercrip nor championing inability, Beckett allows his readers to productively imagine what it might mean to fail better. This is very powerful. This is very powerful because, you know, when Beckett writes about his disabled characters, when Beckett writes about his characters who are going through trauma, when Beckett writes about his characters uh, in and we study it in terms of affect or trauma or disability, or in terms of ethnic studies, or in terms of new theories like latest cultural studies developments, you know, or in terms of the hottest word, you know, the hottest word in theory now. Can anyone tell me the hottest word in theory now? I mean, that's a very bad way of putting a question without giving any clues. So the hottest word is intersectionality. And I know that, I'm sure that all of you know this word, right? Intersectionalities. I mean, do you know it or not? If one of you can answer me, I am going to close now because, you know, I have carried it to a very high level. And at this level, you know, the minds of people, they can't take it anymore. So I'm going to end now. But surely all of you have heard the word intersectionalities in theory. Beckett is ideal for intersectionality study. Like I told you, ideal. And there are only great writers can come to that point. You know, when, you know, Father Sylvie was talking about semiotic studies and the Bible. The Bible is ideal for intersectionality studies. The Mahabharata, the Ramayana, you know, the Vedas, the Quran, they're all perfect. They're great books because they're written by many authors. There are also supposedly individual authors like Beckett, who also are like, you know, Bibles. And they are, you know, as wide, as important. And they can also be studied in terms of intersectionality. So to come back to the ending, I'm ending where Mercy started. And, you know, I want to quote her very lines to ask you this question, and I will close that. You know, those lines have made Beckett famous. People who know, when you ask about Beckett, in my time, people used to say, are you talking about who is Beckett? And are you talking about Thomas Beckett? And he hadn't heard of Samuel Beckett. Some people had heard of Thomas Beckett, martyr, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Anyway, you know, Beckett, when people speak of Beckett now, they say Nobel Prize winner, great writer. They speak of Waiting for Godot, and they quote these lines: "Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better." I'll repeat it: ever tried, ever failed, no matter. try again, fail again, fail better. It's a very famous quotation. You find it everywhere. Sometimes even without Beckett's name. It's almost as famous as Rumi and Tagore and Shakespeare and all that, this quotation. Now, my question is this to end with. When we read these lines, which come from, one of Beckett's most brilliant works, his last major work, Worst Word Ho. And, I've gone a full gamut. I've talked about what, Unnameable, Mercier and Campier, Molloy. I didn't mention Malondice, how it is. I spoke about so many things. But, when you come to this lines, again, my question is this, there is an economy, there is a precision. And these lines, I want to underline again. These famous lines of Beckett. If anyone is a writer and he writes and, finally a few lines he gives to mankind that they will always remember, can say he's a great writer, even if he didn't get the Nobel Prize. And, Beckett is one such writer. And what is special about these lines is what I want to bring it back to. You can call them writing, you can call them literature, you can call them art, you can call them modern, postmodern, and you can call them something that can be performed. I just performed it. So you can call it drama if you want, or performative art lines. And finally, you can call it poetry, sheer poetry. That's why I can quote it offhand. Because there's an implicit subject there who is speaking, and there aren't any images, but there's an implicit metaphor which holds this, and which makes failure into something that is bearable for us, because it says, ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better. And strangely enough, this gives us hope, although it seems to be saying the opposite of what we wanted to say. Is he trying to say go on failing and fail more? Yeah, he's saying that in a way. Go for greater failures, and you will achieve something tremendous. But he's also saying, when he puts the word fail along with better, that's poetic technique. He's also saying, try again until you succeed. That proverb is there in the back. And Beckett's most favorite word was the word on, O-N, on. He was not only ontological, but he was obsessed with the word on. And his last work, which he wanted people to remember him for, although after that he wrote 2 more works, which is Worst Word Ho. It ends with the same paradox, with this oxymoron. When Unnameable ended, Beckett wrote, in waiting for Godot, you have the word on. Koso whips Lucky, and he says, on, go on. And in Unnameable, Beckett ends by saying, I can't go on, I must go on. Again, that oxymoron. Man is whipping another man, but he says, go on. Which is also like saying, don't give up. One day you will become free. Without the fascist knowing it, he is telling, without the master knowing it, he is telling the slave, put it in terms of Hegelian dialectic, you will become free. And that in Worst Word Ho, Beckett ends with 2 words. Know how on, no way to go on, know how on. I can't go on anymore. But even there, he ends with the word on. So even when he says, I can't go on, by ending with on, if you deconstruct it, there is a message that you can still go on. This is a poetry. Or this is a poetry that never dies. Even when fully killed, it comes back to life. It's like a resurrection. In that sense, Beckett is like a Christian writer. So I will never have my fill of Beckett. I never get tired of studying Beckett. And I hope that I have given you all something more than Beckett, because that is not my only aim. My aim was also to speak as a researcher, to help you in your research, to understand that if you want to do research, you have to study philosophy, psychology, literary theory, literary criticism, history, biography, and politics, economics, and of course you have to study literature. You have to study art, you have to study aesthetic, you have to study ethics, and only then can you, and even it doesn't end with that, you have to study religion, you have to study spirituality, you have to study anti-religion, atheism, theism, anti-theism, humanism, post-humanism, anti-humanism, and only then you begin to get a grip on the writer and on writers and on how to write research articles and research books, how to be an editor, how to do peer editing, all these things. You have to go deeper and deeper all the time. And to end with, yeah, I hope I have given you value with my talk. I wanted to give a really powerful presentation because it is novel. It is in memory of Noel. He was an expert in language. I am an expert in literature, but always learning. And to finally come back to what Beckett has given me, as I said. He has given me this awareness that he is a poet. He is not only a great novelist, he is not only a great dramatist, he is a great poet, not only in his poems, but throughout his works. And he has given me what the Nobel Prize Committee spoke of. That is, in man's deepest destitution, he brings us to a point of elevation. And whoever wrote the 2 lines about Beckett in the Nobel Prize jury, that's a masterly definition. In the depths of destitution, to bring people to the point of elevation. That is the work of literature. I mean, that's really its stuff. And we go about it in different ways. But we have to reach there. We have to reach that mastery if we really want to reach the level that Beckett reached. Thank you.
Thank you, Koshy.
Thank you, Dr. Koshy. It
Thank you, Parvati.
It was a pleasure to listen to your lecture. It was most stimulating. Your speech certainly brought new insights on Beckett. Your talk would have motivated young researchers to view Beckett's writings in a different perspective. Your lecture is an eye-opener to see Beckett as a great point. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And now over to participants. Participants, if you have any questions or doubts, kindly post it in the chat box.
I think our JMS has some questions. Miss, are you there?
JMS?
Yeah, Abita has a question.
Abita, yes, how Beckett is intersectional?
Yeah. I mean, first, let us give, let me ask, this question. What I hope you know the meaning of intersectionality. I hope you know the meaning of intersectionality. But even if you don't know, it's okay, because I'm going to give you the meaning, because I have to start with that. Okay, it's a theoretical framework for understanding how aspects of a person's social and political identities. Example, gender, caste, sex, race, class, sexuality, religion, disability, physical appearance, height, etc., etc., combined to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. Okay, I'm reading it directly from the net. So don't think that I am like a genius who could suddenly produce a definition, from the top of my head. But I want to talk about this. That Beckett, if you study his work, and any good writer, you will see, he is studying discrimination and he is studying privilege. Let us take his most famous work, Waiting for Godot. I am taking it because all of you are familiar with it, including Abida, I hope. Poso and Lucky. Poso stands for discrimination, and he also stands for privilege. And Lucky is discriminated against, and Lucky has no privilege, right? And then let's take a work like Happy Days. In Happy Days, you have a woman covered up to her neck in a mound of earth. The husband is free. Her name is Winnie. And what does this symbolize? Again, you can say that it symbolizes a kind of discrimination against the female or feminine, and how she deals with it. She refuses to allow it to dampen her spirits, and both acts end with her saying, although clearly she's in a very sad situation, she says it's going to be a happy day again, no happy day. And you feel both bittersweet feeling of sadness, but you also admire her tenacity in fighting against her situation. So I hope you understand now. And there are sexuality. First Love is a short story by Beckett, which deals with, how his love is broken up, and how he plays with the cries of the child who he leaves behind with the mother. And as he walks closer to the house that he left behind where the woman is there, he can hear the cries louder. He walks away, he hears it less. And then again he walks a little closer, walks away, finally he walks away entirely. It's a beautiful story to deal with intersectionalities. So is a play called Play. The title itself is an intersectional title, because it's again meta dramatic as well as dramatic, and I could go on. I hope that I hope I have answered the question enough to whet your curiosity to go and find out more about how you can apply intersectionalities to Beckett's work. And you can apply it everywhere. This work is full of opportunities for studying intersectionality. And so are the works of all great writers.
My question, Koshy, can you
Yeah.
hear me? Can you hear
Sure.
me?
Sure, Jaya ma'am, I can.
Koshy, what I want to ask you is the message in Beckett entropic, or is the way he puts it entropic? Because
the way he puts it is entropic. If you study structure in Beckett, he has a pattern always. It's actually a meta structure which you find consistently from the beginning to the end, where he always moves closer to trying to tell you that you are one step nearer to death, but he does it through form.
But then that would
but at
reduce
the
a technique, Koshy. We would reduce entropy or this entropic way of saying into a mere technique. I think, even his messages of hopelessness, pointlessness, meaninglessness, all these are entropic also.
Yeah, but if you take, he has a whole collection. I'm not disagreeing with you, Jaya teacher, because I don't think this is like asking which came first, the chicken or the egg. Okay, so there's no answer. But what I want to point to is even a word like lessness. He has a work called lessness, or he has a work called fizzles. But nothing ever fizzles out in his work entirely. Whether it is, his last work is titled Stirrings Still. And what does that mean? It means, on the one hand, it means still the stirrings, let me die. But on the other hand, it means, I'm on the verge of death, but still there are stirrings of life in me. So it goes beyond form, as you say, but it also, he creates that effect because of his mastery in language, which is not technique. It's about form. It's about how.
Yes, and you left out horoscope. Koshi,
Yeah.
I was all waiting. I was, anxiously waiting for you to talk about horoscope because it's connected with Rene Descartes.
Yeah. Horoscope is, of
Line.
course, about Descartes. And, I have done a very detailed study of horoscope, which is very early Beckettian, which is very much like Dear Salient. It's a
Yes,
poem with notes.
yes.
But my problem with a poem like horoscope now is, I feel that I feel that it's not that I left it out. It is that, I have already done a study on Beckett as a poet,
Okay.
looking at him as a traditional poet and studying his poems. I can extend that by bringing in the French poems. But right now in this talk, I wanted to address the problem of looking at all the works of Beckett as poetry.
Okay.
And,
Koshi,
that's something which was really on my mind.
Koshi, one more point.
Yeah.
The last part about intersectionality, I think
Yeah.
it's very, very relevant because we now are facing that identity. Each, who am I? I am what you tell me. I have no identity as such. Do I belong to a place? Do I belong to a nationality? Do I belong to a career wise, is there, am I a mason, a carpenter, teacher? There I have my nomenclature is linked to my work. So
Yes.
we have this crisis now, as you said, about
Yeah.
the crisis of belonging. One day you are a migrant. Next day you are an expatriate.
Yes.
Third day you are homeless.
Right. This is why I like Beckett, because I consider Beckett a weapon, a very potent weapon to
Yeah.
fight against people who try to label, uh, especially, in the fight against fascism. And Beckett was always involved in the fight against fascism. He stood, for example, he was on the side of Václav Havel. He was on the side of, Salman Rushdie. He was one of the signatories of a document which said that, he was against the fatwa against Salman Rushdie. And he was in the resistance. He won the, Croix de Guerre, Cross of War. He has always fought against fascism. He fought against Hitler, against Germany, against anti-Semitism. And, one of the things that's happening now, against which intersectionalities matters, or disability studies, or ethnic studies, or trauma studies, it matters a lot, mental health studies, is because, people label you. For example, you are discriminated against for belonging to a minority, or, for belonging to a caste, or for belonging to a gender or a sexuality, or you're discriminated against for belonging to a religion. And what do you do then? You know, you on the one hand, you're forced to accept that you belong to that religion because you want to defend yourself. You're forced to defend yourself. You have no choice but to defend yourself. You are threatened, and so you have to accept what the world gives you as your identity and say, I take it, I'm going to fight back using this identity. But at another level, you also have to accept identity fluidity, that you are not that, or you are not just that what the world tells you you are. You are something more or something less. You are nothing and everything. And here intersectionalities comes in. And you also have to see the shifting positions in ideology. You know, for example, if someone tells me you are a Christian, you are a rice bag Christian, what does that mean to me? I am, labeled as a Christian before being asked, are you a Christian or not? And I am accused for converting someone before I convert someone or not, for something I did or my ancestors did. And then how do I react? And if I react by saying, yes, I accept I am a Christian and yeah, I am going to convert people, and I see that at the same time, Christians are oppressing others, let us say in USA, people like Donald Trump. And there am I able to say, no, here I am not a Christian. I stand with, people like Puerto Ricans whom he is oppressing, people like Mexicans whom he is oppressing. And for me here, what's important for me is not to assert my identity as a Christian, but to stand against it. So can I hold several different positions at the same time, which becomes ideologically and identity wise and gender wise and every other wise, something that I need to cultivate in present times. I don't know whether you understand what I'm talking of. But this is why intersectionality in Beckett is very significant, because he does this. He does this. He does
Hello,
this. He
Koshy.
represents.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Koshy. I think your explanation is very nice. We'll have to move on because the timing for the meeting is nearly up. Okay. Thank you very much for answering all the questions.
I have a request.
Yes, yes.
Jay teacher, got cut off. Can she complete what she wanted to say about Noel now?
Yes, she's going to speak on Noel now. She's going to speak. Thank you.
See, Koshy, what I wanted to tell Noel that today he has given a new meaning to the word virtual. Virtual is not abstract anymore. Virtual reality is now gadget infused reality. So when I think of Noel, and when I think of you, Koshy, you're so near, even though you are physically so far away. It brings all of us together. It not only just rekindles memories, it makes us young again. It makes us young again and want to remember more. Thank you, Koshy. You were lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you, JMM. Now I invite Dr. Clara B. Reshma, Organizing Secretary, who made all the preparations for this webinar to deliver the vote of thanks.
Ma'am, please unmute your microphone. Okay, ma'am.
Dr. Sylvia Anthony, Principal, Infant Jesus Higher Secondary School. Dr. JMS, our former HOD. Dr. Cynthia, our present HOD. Dr. Parvati, my colleagues in the department, students, and dear participants. A very warm good evening to one and all. It's 6 years Noel Jose left for his eternal abode. Dr. Noel Jose was one of the main architects of our college, garnering the coveted autonomy status. He worked tirelessly for it. Many of his students and we, his colleagues, pine for the time spent with him and wish we had more time with him. I deem it a privilege to have been the convener of the Dr. Noel Jones Memorial Lecture Series right from 2015, my might to perpetuate the memory of dear colleague. Now to the task entrusted to me. Dr. A.V. Koshy, the resource person for today's webinar, is an author, scholar, critic, a person with a lot of erudition as you have witnessed it. And above all, he's a good human being. He has truly reconstructed Beckett to us with his insights, his scholarship, his erudition, and his detailing. He has also shared the lenses through which a researcher can proceed with their research. On behalf of the Department of English, Fatima Moda National College, I place on record my sincere gratitude to Koshy for this very enlightening talk. You have really reconstructed and taken us on an odyssey on Beckett. I thank you, Koshy, for graciously consenting to deliver the keynote address today. Dr. Sylvie Anthony, Principal of Infant Jesus, a close friend and well-wisher of Noel, always extended his support to the conduct of the Dr. Noel Jones Memorial Lecture Series. On behalf of the entire department, I thank you, Father, from the bottom of my heart for joining us today. Dr. Jaya Takem, our former head, continues to be an integral part of our department. Thank you so much, ma'am, for sharing those times and for bringing in this virtual reality, for reminding us that the virtual reality cuts boundaries and brings us all closer. I thank our principal, Dr. Vincent B. Netto, the manager, Father Anil Jose, pro-manager, Father Abhilash Gregory, for their constant support and encouragement in all the activities of the department. My sincere gratitude to the IQAC coordinator, Dr. Shaiju, Dr. Parvati, Dr. Shijan, and Mr. Prijit for all the technical support and motivation they lent in organizing such webinars. The HOD, Dr. Cynthia, is ever keen to move with the times. She has spared no effort in the conduct of today's webinar. With her resources and her resourcefulness, she has made this webinar a success. Thank you very much, Dr. Cynthia. The Dean of Arts of our college, Dr. Parvati's commitment to every activity of the department is commendable. I thank you for that insightful intro to Dr. Koshy Parvati. I thank Dr. Mercy Famila for efficiently anchoring today's international webinar. I thank every member of the department, Dr. Supriya, Professor Stanley, Dr. Manoj, Professor Christy, Professor Soni, Professor Jaya Sani, who have each in their own way contributed to the success of today's webinar. I thank Dr. Darshina Ambiga and all the members of the self-financing section for their active participation in today's webinar. On behalf of the Department of English, Fatima Mada National College, my profound thanks to every participant of today's webinar. Thank you, one and all gathered here.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you, Parvati. Thank you, Jaya teacher, all of you. Cynthia, thank you especially. Thanks to Vincent, who's not there. And I don't know who else is there. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Koshy.
Koshy.
Thank you, Koshy.
Thank you.
Thank you
Great
so much.
seeing all of you.
Same here. We are also very happy, like the old times.
Yeah.
And one student was commenting that Noel taught Beckett to them.
Wow. Great.
So today is a very good day. One of the best of our lecture series. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So much,
If
Koshy.
you have a recording, please share the link with me later. Huh?
Yes.
Definitely.
Thank you, sir.
I'll share it.
Bye.
Bye, Koshy.
Shall I leave now?
Yes.
Yes.
Bye,
Koshy.
Parvati.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye.
Koshy.
Take it.